Welcome to our webinar Wednesday for December. If you could let me know in the chat of the summative, I'd appreciate it. Our topic for today is learning runs waste. It's a directed rubric. That's not right. Our topic is learning runs assessment. Here the set is not good. So let me see if I can adjust anything. What makes a difference for the microphone is. Can you give me a check back? Is the audio a little bit better now? Is that better? Thank you very much. Okay, I will try to talk louder and see if that helps as well. So, thank you for joining us. And I want to introduce our today. I'm sorry, but it's education session, so we're going to today. Can you introduce yourselves and say hello to them here?
Sorry about that. I'm Hannah Lakin at the Maine Math and Science Alliance.
And I'm Perrin Chick at Maine Math and Science Alliance as well. And we are so appreciative to be here on today's webinar. Thank you for including us.
Strategies that you can take away from the webinar today and put to use. I'm going to take the video off so that you can pay attention to what we're saying and what we're talking about. And we're going to start by asking you a little bit about where you're coming from. Before we start this journey together, we want to get a sense of who you are and what experiences you're bringing to this video or to this webinar. So I'm going to pull up a couple of polls, and I'd like your feedback. Okay, can you see those polls on the board in front of you? Yes, you must be able to because I see people who are responding. Thank you for today. It looks like we have kind of some mixed experience with using rubrics. Not everyone has used a rubric, but it's not an unfamiliar topic. So I'm glad to hear that. We're going to talk a little bit more about rubrics at the end of the workshop today. And it looks like we have a lot of people who are doing some assessment in their program, but more of us are assessing staff than assessing youth. So we're going to be focusing today on strategies that will help you understand what youth are learning from their experiences in your program. Again, thanks so much for sharing your input with us on the polls and helping us get to know you a little bit better. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Hannah now, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about the ACRES project and the work that they're doing. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Sandra. As I said, I'm Hannah Lakin of the Maine Math and Science Alliance, and our project manager on the ACRES project, Perrin Chick, is here with me today, and her contact information is listed here on this slide. The ACRES project, or After School Coaching for Rural Educators in STEM, is generously funded by the Noyce Foundation and STEM Next. And ACRES is a national professional development project out of MMSA in Augusta, Maine. The heart of the ACRES project really involves after-school and out-of-school time educators coming together, both in person and virtually, to share video recordings of their work with youth and to reflect together on specific STEM skills that they are developing. We work in tandem with Click to Science by providing educators with long-term professional development that focuses on the skills identified by Click as important to informal STEM learning. So what is ACRES? Here is a diagram of our professional development model. ACRES is a cyclical professional development model in that it's a repetitive process of learning, practice, and reflection. The program is primarily virtual so that we can work with the most rural of educators. We take advantage of video conferencing so that it is fully interactive and conversations happen just as they would in person. So the model is that we begin with a STEM skill workshop in a cohort of usually 4 to 6 educators with a coach, and we talk about skills ranging from asking purposeful questions of youth to giving youth voice and choice and control in STEM programs, as well as the science and engineering processes. Educators then go back to their after-school programs, record themselves practicing the skill with youth, and then a few weeks later they review videos of their peers in their cohort and participate in a virtual coaching session where they give and receive thoughtful feedback with their peers. So one of the STEM skills for after school that we focus on in ACRES is making authentic assessments in STEM. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about what the difference between formative assessment and summative assessment are. In Paige Keeley's text on assessment in science, she says that formative assessment is assessment for learning, while summative assessment is assessment of learning. So formative assessment is an authentic way of understanding what students know, but also to help students understand what they know. It also is found right in the middle of the learning that is occurring, so we learn from it as we go. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we should be assessing students in an after-school program and what type of assessment we could use. So the type of assessment we use in out-of-school time is probably not what we usually associate with assessment, whether it be tests or quizzes. We're really looking to see what students know and how we can use that knowledge to shape learning in the future. So let's discuss why, and then we'll discuss how to use formative assessment authentically in STEM after school. So to begin with the why, there's several benefits for youth, and those being, but not limited to, activating learning and engaging youth in their learning, as well as for youth to recognize what they have or have not learned so far, or for youth to consider alternative viewpoints. And this can involve self or peer assessing. So there's also benefits to using formative assessment for educators as they develop their programs. And those could be to evaluate effectiveness of a lesson, or to differentiate instruction for their students, or to really gather evidence of student learning. So Perrin and I are going to talk about 2 different strategies that we talk about in the ACRES professional development program. And one of them is actually one of the other skills found in ACRES and Click to Science, and that's using purposeful questions. One of the most simple formative assessment strategies really is asking purposeful questions of youth. And the strategy has a whole Click to Science skill devoted right to it. And purposeful questions can be as simple as asking, what do you mean by that? Or can you say more about that? It's really digging in to ask youth to elaborate more, to dig in and figure out what they're thinking. Because we all know that when we let youth do the talking and truly listen to their answers, giving them plenty of time to think and talk, we learn what they are understanding and maybe what they should continue to discover. So asking purposeful questions while groups are working together can also spark self and peer assessment of learning as well. So one thing that often gets discussed in cohorts of educators in ACRES is how we respond to youth after asking a purposeful question. Perhaps we come up with what we think is an amazing question that will surely get a student thinking. Then we respond with, nice, or that's great, because we need to move on to the next person. Haven't we all been there when we have a large group of youth and so many students to get to? So one educator in particular in ACRES set a goal of making sure to really listen to her students in order to better assess their learning and thinking. She worked on following up with another question or summarizing what the student said back to them. Later, she found that it was okay if she didn't make it to everyone, as the other students were listening to each other, just as she had modeled, listening after asking her questions.
Hannah explained a way to verbally assess students. This next strategy is a self-assessment tool that can be used by students and by staff to visually assess what students know and how groups are working. So we call it the traffic light, and it's a fun way with very low supplies to get a sense of what's going on in an after-school program and with group work. In this picture, you see youth holding up a green card, means saying they are confident with the answer. They know what is going on, and they understand everything. We've also been able to use the green light to ask a question, and if it's a true, they will hold up a green card so you can see whether at a quick glance they understand it. The yellow card means they don't know or they have some hesitation. And the red card means I need additional help. A great way to use the traffic light assessment tool is when groups are doing group work. They then the teacher can ask, are you ready to continue? How is everything going? The green light indicates they are able to move ahead smoothly. The yellow indicates that they need a little bit of support, and the red would mean they need to be redirected. So in the ACRES module, we like to have a variety of self-assessment tools, like the traffic light, like the purposeful questions, and there are several others in the skill module that allow us to use games and art, visual representations, and the listening skills to really understand what students are doing, where the lesson needs to go, and how the learning is being acquired. If you have any questions about any of these assessment strategies, and I guess, again, it is a very small sampling, feel free to ask us, but at this time we'll turn it back over to Sandra.
Thank you, Perrin. Let's try out this strategy. So in the chat box, just respond with a green, yellow, or red, and let us know how you're feeling about the strategies that Hannah and Perrin shared that they use in their program. Are you understanding? Are you ready to move on, or would you like to hear more about what they're doing? Great, thank you so much. See, this works even in a virtual setting. We can get some feedback from you quickly about how we're doing and whether we're ready to move on to the next topic. Again, thank you so much for sharing with us about the ACRES project. And if you are interested in learning more, share your questions in the chat box, or check out the link to the Maine Math and Science Alliance and the web resources that'll tell you more about the project. So we've talked a little bit about strategies that are used to kind of assess learning as you're going. That would be a formative assessment of how things are going. Summative assessments, as we mentioned, is assessing at the end of the learning to see if they've met the goals that you set out for them. So one way to think about this is formative assessment is assessment for learning as you're in the learning process, checking to see how things are going. Summative assessment is assessment of learning to ensure that you've reached the goals that you had for the learning experience. I think one of the things that Perrin and Hannah helped us understand that assessment is part of the learning process. It's not separate from learning, but assessment can help students learn, to help them take more control of their learning and more responsibility for what they've learned. And both formative and summative assessments help students think more deeply and make better sense of what they're learning, especially when they receive good feedback from the facilitator about how they're doing with their learning. Remember that especially in our after-school environments, we can use both formal and informal assessments of learning. It doesn't all have to look like a test or a standard assessment, and there may be things that you're already doing now to assess learning that you don't think of as assessment because they're not formal assessment tools. So what I'd like you to share with us is some of the tools that you're using to assess learning in after-school environments. So what are strategies that you have found helpful? Hopefully you'll see I pulled up a chat box there for you to share your ideas of how do you assess in a formative or a summative way how students are doing. I'll pause for a moment so you typing. You've got some good ideas in the chat box. It looks like a lot of us are using purposeful questions, but I do appreciate as people started thinking a little bit more, they shared some other types of strategies. I like Tracy's idea of writing down what they're learning or what they're thinking or questioning and then crumpling it up and tossing it into a box so that it's anonymous, but they have their input. We're going to move on in just a minute, but I want to let people finish typing their ideas. And we're going to talk about a particular strategy of developing a rubric. This is one of the strategies highlighted in some of the Click to Science videos. And it's a idea that maybe more based in a classroom setting, but you'll see the facilitator in this video has done a really good job of adapting it to an after-school environment, making it more informal and more student-directed, so that it's appropriate for an after-school setting, but a strategy that can help us see student learning in a different way. So let's move on to talk about a rubric. A rubric is a visual representation of performance expectations for the learning experience. And there's a pretty standardized model for what that visually might look like. It's a tool for assessing student work or performance on a learning activity. It divides the learning task into distinct parts and provides clear descriptions and feedback on the performance for each of those parts. And it includes different levels of mastery. Usually those might be exemplary, competent, developing, or needs improvement, and not demonstrated. So the students can assess where they're at in that progression of mastery. And one of the things that it does for learners is it provides them clear expectations of what mastery looks like and what they need to do to be successful in that learning experience. In the video later, you'll see the facilitator using numbers rather than descriptions for the level of mastery, but she uses 1 through 4, with 4 representing exemplary performance and developing or needing improvement. In terms of authentic assessment, it is important to recognize that rubrics let students know what is expected of them, and when they're used, as you see in the video, they also can allow students to assess their own learning and level of mastery. What we're going to see in the video is how the facilitator engages the students, the learners, in developing the rubric. And when learners help develop the rubric, they help define what each part of the task is and what mastery looks like and what is expected of them. So they've really internalized those expectations as they work with you to develop the rubric, and they understand the task more deeply and are committed to the criteria that you've set out together because they help develop that definition of what success looks like. So we're going to watch a video from Click to Science, and Gabby is the facilitator here. And we want you to notice what Gabby does in the video to engage youth in creating the rubric with her. How does she give them voice in this process of creating the rubric? And how does she direct them to focus on the areas of the activity that she thinks are important, that she wants them to pay attention to? Gabby's a staff member at an after-school club in a middle school, and she's working with students to create a rubric on a biology activity that they're going to be doing together. We want you to pay attention to both what she's doing in that process and how you see the impact of her creating that rubric with students. I'm going to start with a video that gives you an overview of the activity she's doing with the students. She's going to be helping them learn about plants and the structure of plants. And then after we've watched that one and we kind of know where she's going with this activity, then we're going to watch her go through this process of developing the rubric with students. I'll start the video and pause it for just a minute just to make sure everybody's hearing the audio okay. Okay. So I just want to double check, is everybody hearing and seeing the video before I start it? It looks like a couple of people are having problems, so I'm going to adjust the chat box here. There is a link, I guess it's in the web resources, so I'll move this back down. Creating a rubric. Oh, there, Melissa's got it. There's the link to the video, so if you're having trouble. All right, let's start that again.
So what today is going to look like, first you guys are going to make a plant completely out of your own mind from what stuff that you know about plants already, okay? And we brought some plants that you can look at to design your own plant, but I want you to include like roots and stems and a flower if you want to, leaves, and then we're going to learn about plants. Okay, so let's go look at the plants really quick just so you guys can get a quick idea of what you think you might want to do.
To get a better understanding of plants, youth design a plant model labeling all the essential parts.
We have tape, we have pipe cleaners. What's the first thing we need?
Stem.
Okay, what's the second thing we need?
Leaves.
What's the third thing we need?
Roots.
You guys are going to have about 20 minutes to complete your original, imaginative, quality plant, okay? So let's look at the roots really quick. So the primary and secondary roots, and then the different types of roots. Can you guys guess what that primary root does?
That's what gets all the water and the nutrients.
It digs all the way down. It grows and grows and grows, right? And what do you guys know what leaves do?
Yes. No. Honestly, no.
They do photosynthesis, right? Are you super gluing that too?
I have the stem, I have the leaves, I have the roots, I have the seeds, and I have the petals.
These are the roots. It has leaves and it has two boy flowers because it has pollen. Yeah.
As I pull up the next video, I want to give you a chance to ask any questions you have about the activity itself. They're learning about the structures of plants by developing their own plant models. Then after they've started their models, Gabby has a handout that she shares with them that shows them the different parts and structures of the plant. And then they do a little bit of more work on their models and make additions if they want to. So are there any questions about the activity itself? Not seeing any questions coming up in the chat box. I'm going to go ahead and share the next video where she's developing the rubric with them. So you've got a sense of what the activity looks like. So pay attention now to how she helps them understand what the important parts of this activity is, what she wants them to accomplish, but also how she gives them voice in this process and engages them in helping to create the rubric.
First, what we're going to do, I came up with 3 categories once we get done building our plants, the key things that you should be focusing on when you're building your plants. And I decided on effort, the use of your resources and information, and creativity.
One effective strategy of giving youth control and making authentic assessments is to allow youth to have self-determination and set goals for their performance in a STEM activity. A great way to show this is to have youth come up with a rubric to estimate outcomes. In this video, watch as frontline staff person Gabby works with youth to create a rubric for a plant activity. Pay special attention to how she guides youth to think objectively and critically about their performance, but allows them their voice in setting up the guidelines.
Have you guys ever seen like a rubric? Do you use that in class? So you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 is the best? Okay, so if we're thinking of that kind of rubric and we're thinking about our effort, what does our effort look like when it's a 4 with this activity?
Like excellent or awesome, I guess.
Excellent or awesome effort, how? Tell me exactly what excellent or awesome effort looks like.
Following directions.
Okay. Following directions.
Staying on task.
Staying on task, I like that one. Does anyone else have an idea of what a 4 would look like for effort with this particular activity?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Doing your work properly.
So what would a 3 look like?
You kind of fluctuated between staying and not staying on task.
Okay, so could we say mostly stay on task?
Yeah.
And what does a 2 look like?
Kind of staying on task.
Kind of on task. What would a 1 look like today?
Never, like, ignoring the teacher, not doing your work right, and not staying on task.
You guys made these expectations for what a 1, 2, 3, and 4 are, okay?
So I'm guessing you want us to do either the 3 or the 4.
I want you to be, pretty high up there. Okay, so let's get started on making your first plant. With all those considerations, to get a 4 today, to get a complete original plant, what things are you going to need to have?
The stigma and the
Anther?
anther,
Yep.
and then the stem and the leaves, and then the pollen.
Yep. Okay, so now that we have kind of all of our plants done, let's look back up here at our scale. I'll give you like a minute to think about it, and then you're going to hold up a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4, which you would grade yourself on your performance today, okay? For effort. So did you follow directions the entire time? Did you stay on task the entire time? Did you do your work properly to the best of your abilities? Or did you wander backwards a little bit? That'd be okay. Did you kind of get off task a little? Okay, so let's hold up our numbers in 3, 2, 1. Yes, for effort. So we have a 3, a 3, a 4, and a 7.
No, it's in between.
Okay, so between a 3 and 4. I would agree with that. I think you guys put in a lot of effort to this. I think you did a really good job.
I'm going to pull up some chat pods so you can give your feedback on what you noticed in the video. What are the strategies that she used to engage youth and give them voice? How did she focus their attention on the important parts of the activity? Oops, that's the wrong one. And then the last one was, what did you think of the assessment strategies she used? Would you have used the similar or different assessment strategies? So take a minute now to give your input from what you saw in the video to those questions. It looks like we have some good comments in the chat boxes. Feel free to add some more ideas as you're going. I'd love to hear from you. Do you think this is reasonable? Is this something you or the staff in your program could do? Does it make sense in an after-school setting? I do really like this video. I think the facilitator does a good job engaging youth in the rubric at the beginning as they're developing it, and also at the end. Oh, Tim, I'm sorry to hear you have to leave. We are recording it so you can catch the rest of it later. Thanks for joining us. Back to the rubric. She does a great job engaging youth in defining what each of those levels looks like in the activity, but keeping it focused on the parts she wanted to emphasize in the activity. And then at the end, she comes back to that rubric and has them assess themselves and then gives them feedback on whether she feels like they assess themselves fairly. There were also a couple points in the middle where she would refer to the rubric as they were going through the activity, like when she asked, what would you need to include on your plant to get a 4, to have a completely original plant? So I think in this example, she did a good job really utilizing that rubric throughout the activity. But I'd love to hear what you think if this is something that staff in your program would be able to do, youth in your program would be able to do. Or is there a way you might have to change it or do it differently in order to make more sense for your program? Give me just a moment to close the chat boxes and move on to the next part of our webinar. Gabby came back to the rubric and asked youth to assess themselves. She asked them to evaluate themselves on how they did. We saw her asking for their input on how they did on their effort, but she did that for each of the 3 parts of the rubric. They also received feedback from the facilitator on how they did for each of those parts of the activity. And the goal here is to help them become self-directed learners as they're learning to get better at assessing their own effort in the learning situation. The feedback Gabby gave to the group was just to the group as a whole. But this could also be used to give feedback to individual learners, and especially if you're doing a long-term project where the effort comes over the series of several sessions, it might be helpful to give students feedback as they're going through that project so they know how they're doing. She doesn't have to assign them a grade because this is an after-school learning experience, so she doesn't need to assess students individually. The only reason you might want to do that if it will be really helpful for those individuals to enhance their learning or their ability to contribute to the group, then it might be helpful to give them individual feedback. But for her, in this activity, she's using that rubric to help keep youth focused on the parts of the activity she wants them to focus on and know what mastery looks like for that, and to give them the opportunity to evaluate themselves as learners and receive feedback on how well they did in evaluating themselves. She uses a rubric also to assess how successful the activity was as she led it. She wants to know if the student reached the objective she had for the activity, and by asking them to assess themselves, she is getting that feedback from them on how they're doing and reaching those objectives. And at the same time, developing their skills to assess themselves as learners. So we've covered the basics here, giving you some specific strategies you can use with youth, asking purposeful questions, the streetlight strategy, and the student-directed rubrics are all things you can use in your program. But I'm really not sure that's quite enough for you to be ready to assess learning in your after-school program. So we do want to know if you have the resources you need. So in the main chat box here, please let us know if you have questions or if there's more resources or support that would be helpful to you. We also want to share with you the resources that you can download from the webinar that can help you with these areas. So just the chat box here so you can see the files to download. There's a couple of training resources there if you want to work with your staff on training them to create student-directed rubrics. The training resource there will help you do that. And there's a 30-minute resource that can be a follow-up to that to help them understand and get better at that skill. There's also some web links down below that you can check out. There's a link to the Click the Science website for creating a rubric. There's an article on Edutopia that helps explain what rubrics are for and how they work. And RubyStar is a tool you can use online to create rubrics. And there's also a link there to the Maine Math and Science Alliance to learn more about the ACRES project and the book that Perrin and Hannah shared with us, Science Formative Assessment by Paige Keeley. Those are all resources that we want you to download if you would like more support. And if you have any questions or things you'd like us to cover in more detail for either Hannah and Perrin and the ACRES project, or any questions you have for me about these resources, please share those in the chat pod. I'm going to finish a little bit early. Here's the bottom line that we want to leave you with. We hope that you're leaving this webinar with specific strategies that you and your staff can use for assessment for learning. That's the formative assessment and assessment of learning, to enhance engagement and help youth develop as self-directed learners in your program. So we're helping them get more out of the learning experience, but we're also developing those personal qualities, those 21st century skills that will help them be successful in life as they're directing their own learning, not just always responding to a teacher or a facilitator. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you leave the webinar, we will ask you to give us some feedback on how things went and take just a couple minutes to complete the survey. It's very brief. I want to give a shout out to all the people that we've trained in the last month. I just came back from a great training in Atlanta, and if you are interested in partnering with Click to Science and would like to have us do a training, please do feel free to contact us. And also, if you'd like to learn more about the ACRES project, please contact them too. We want you to leave with all the resources that you need. Our next Wednesday webinar will be in 2017 on January 18th, and the topic in January will be encouraging collaborative STEM work. So we hope you'll be able to join us for that one on the 18th. In the meantime, please do remember to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest to get lots of ideas about making STEM click. Thanks again for joining us today, and we have recorded the webinar, so you'll be able to download that in a couple days and check that out and give us your feedback on the survey. We really want to know what we can do to meet your needs and what topics you might like to have us cover in future webinars. If you are interested in being part of the ACRES project and would like to learn more about this virtual coaching that they're doing and the professional development, please do contact Perrin, and there's an email that you can contact them at. We want to hear from you, and we'd love to see more of our Click to Science fans join ACRES in the work that they're doing. Again, thanks for joining us today, and have a wonderful holiday season. We'll see you again on January 18th.